Test 1, 2, 3. Good morning. Welcome to the Maryland Public Service Commission's administrative meeting for October 26, 2022. I trust everybody got in their exercise this morning. Apologize for that fire drill. I was not aware of that, but we do have a packed agenda today. Before we get started, I'd like to make a few personnel announcements, a few this week, and we'll have a few next week. First, I'd like to introduce Amira Mitchell. Amira joined the Transportation Division last week. There she is. Good morning. She's going to be an administrative aide. In this role, she will serve the Transportation Division's front-line contact, greeting and assisting clients that come to visit us upstairs. Before joining the Transportation Division, she told me that she was with the Pinkerton Corporation for over 10 years, and she worked as a quality control specialist there. I think she'll take the talents from Pinkerton and apply them to her new role upstairs. So, Amira, welcome to the team. We've had a number of personnel moves on the 16th floor recently, and I'd like to announce those. First is a return of a familiar face, Kathy Fuston. Is Kathy here? There she is in the front row. Kathy most recently served as the right hand to the Motor Vehicles Administration Administrator, Chrissy Nizar, who was also another PSC alum. Kathy has returned in her new role as a legislative and special projects advisor. She'll also be supporting Commissioner Richard and Commissioner Bubar with some of their administrative functions. So welcome back, Kathy. A familiar face that has joined the 16th floor from the 17th floor is Brett Sproul. Brett is in the room, I believe, in the back there. Brett was most recently with the Electricity Division under the command of Drew McCullough, and he has joined the commission as the commissioners on the 16th floor as our newest technical advisor. So Brett still has one foot in the technical staff role, and I believe he'll be presenting today. Once he relinquishes those duties, he will be assisting the commissioners on a number of projects. And lastly, Jared DeLucia. Is Jared here? Jared's not here today, but he has joined us recently. As an advisor, he's also a DOE fellow, so he's actually a Fed on loan to the commission. He has a degree in economics and history from the University of Pittsburgh, and he's going to be assisting us with sustainability issues, clean energy, climate strategy, as well as he has some interest in transmission planning. He is on loan to us for the next year, possibly 2 years, from the Department of Energy. So we welcome Jared to the advisory team as well. We'll have more personnel updates for you next week. We do have a meeting minutes to approve from our last administrative meeting on the 12th of October. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. The meeting minutes are approved. Good morning, Mr. Secretary.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. We have two items on the consent agenda this morning. Item number one is FiberLight LLC filed a notice of certain financing transactions whereby FiberLight will incur long-term debt obligations. And item two is Spectratel of Maryland LLC and Spectratel Ultimate Holdings LLC filed its joint application of Spectratel Inc. and Spectratel Ultimate Holdings for authority to change control of Spectratel of Maryland and for certain financing arrangements.
With respect to item number one, I would move that we note the filing, and with respect to item number two, I would move that we note the transfer of control and associated financing arrangements. The vote begins with Commissioner Bubar.
Aye.
Commissioner Linton.
Aye.
Commissioner O'Donnell.
Aye.
And Commissioner Richard.
Aye.
I vote aye. The motions are approved.
First item on the administrative agenda, item number three is Hovey Energy LLC filed an application for a license to supply electricity or electric generation services in Maryland.
Thank you. Good morning. Do we have counsel for Hovey Energy LLC present? Yes. Sir, if you could please take the podium to your right. After staff makes their statement, you'll have an opportunity to respond. Good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. Charles Herbert on behalf of staff. Item 3 is an application from Hovey Energy LLC to request a license to supply electric broker services to Maryland customers. In a March 11, 2015 letter order, the Commission granted the company a license to supply electricity in Maryland limited to broker services. On September 3, 2021, staff notified the company by email that its bond was to cancel. Staff reached out to the company twice more by email on September 3rd, 2021 and September 17th, 2021 respectively, and once by mail on September 10th, 2021. The company did not respond to any of the contact attempts by staff, and the commission canceled the company's license on October 13th, 2021. After operating without licensure for approximately 1 year, the company reapplied on September 9th, 2022. No complaints against the company have been received in Maryland or any other state. Staff recommends the commission grant the company a license to operate as an electricity supplier in Maryland, limited to broker services to residential and commercial customers. Staff also recommends the commission issue a civil penalty to the company in the amount of $10,000. Finally, staff recommends the commission direct the company to notify the commission within 30 days of any changes to the information upon which the commission relied in granting this license.
Thank you, Mr. Herbert. A nice job on your first presentation to the commission. We'll turn to counsel for Hovey Energy LLC. If you could enter an appearance, please.
Hi, my name is Robert Hovey. I'm the owner of Hovey Energy.
Thank you, Mr. Hovey. Would you like to respond to Mr. Herbert's summary?
Yes, please. We have a management company that handles all of our licensing in all the different states that we do business in. We just celebrated 10 years in business. No complaints anywhere. We pride ourselves on doing a great job, and it is kind of cumbersome and overwhelming to manage all license and surety bonds by ourselves. It's definitely a full-time job. So many, many years ago, when we first started, we hired a company, License Logics, that specializes in applying for and managing all of your license, surety bonds, and organizing that so you're on top of everything you need to be. And we've never had an issue, and smooth sailing in each state. We were made aware of apparently we were made aware last I believe it was October that we paid for a surety bond for last year, sent License Logic the money to have that taken care of, and there was no application along with it, so I have the receipt. It wasn't sent in. My partner, Megan, found out that our license wasn't renewed. We never received an email. I think there's old information perhaps that the commission has that needs to be updated, and we certainly never got anything in the mail, or we would have responded immediately, because it's a simple process and easy to do. And we immediately stopped selling in Maryland as soon as we found that out, and did the application to get back on board with having a new license. I was just told the day before yesterday that it'd be recommended if someone represented Hovey Energy shows up. I got on a plane last night, and here I am. But I also have a letter from License Logic that accepts full responsibility. They had a simple account manager change, and they submitted for the surety bond, but they didn't submit the renewal like clockwork for this last year, and we had no idea we were operating without a license. None at all. We would never have done that. And so here I am, just, our apologies, and, they said, and we say anything we can do to make that right. We always want to do the right thing.
Thank you, Mr. Hovey. Obviously, any mistakes incurred by your agents reflect back to you and your company there. We did attempt to contact you multiple times in September of 2021 to the extent staff had out-of-date contact information or email addresses. Obviously, it's important on you or your agents to keep that information current. The fact that your company was operating without a license in the state, and the fact that the bond was canceled by the insurance company are egregious matters before this commission. And I appreciate staff's recommendation, and I do plan to support it today. I turn to my colleagues if they have questions. Commissioner O'Donnell.
Mr. Herbert,
Yes, Commissioner.
you know I have a long history of grilling new-time staff members before
Yes,
this commission.
Yes, Commissioner.
I'm going to let you off the hook today because you did such a fine job presenting. So, thank you.
Thank you.
And welcome.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Mr. Hovey, it seems like you have remorsefully come before the commission, and I appreciate that. But do you understand the severity of what you did? Do you? Can you affirm that?
I absolutely do. It's mortifying to us when we found out. We couldn't believe we were operating without a license because we would never, ever do that.
Well, I get some comfort in knowing that you don't have any complaints, because if you did, I'd be drilling you. I'd be hammering you. So I'm going to support the commission's, the staff's recommendation before the commission, but I hope I don't see you here again. Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Bubar?
Thank you. Again, Charles, I'd like to recognize you did a very good job. Thank you. Mr. Hovey, thank you very much for being here, and thank you for what you said. It's really helpful to hear that perspective from you. The staff noted that there had been multiple attempts to contact you, and there was no response. Were those attempts to your company or to your representative? And if they were to the company, why was there no response?
I don't have all the information, and I can dig further to find out how, because from my position, I delegate authority to a lot of people to have things handled and ran correctly. From my understanding, I started the company with my ex-wife, and she was originally in charge of being the point person with License Logic. It is very possible, I believe, that they might have my old partner's email. Certainly not Megan, my current partner, or myself, and I would assume that the person that they had as the point of contact at License Logic, who is no longer there, it just got unaddressed. I do know, and I asked Megan, my current partner, who's on top of everything, there certainly was no letter sent to us. We would have immediately responded. Something like that we take very seriously. The mere fact that I got on a plane to come here, I hope shows you that, and the fact that we run such a clean operation with no complaints. We always want to do the right thing. So we'll have to check into that. How did we not receive that letter? And in the future, if there's any other correspondence, how do we make sure that we receive that? Do you have everything correct? And that's the next step for sure.
Thank you. That's
Yes.
necessary.
Yes.
Thank you.
Commissioner Linton?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good morning to both staff and the company. For the company, as a broker, you weren't you weren't signing customers to contracts, so you were brokering them to other competitive suppliers.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, we're just a broker.
Okay.
Yes.
So, as part of your brokering, you said you stopped all sales once you found out that your license and your information here had been suspended. Prior to that, did you have actual customers brokered with contracts in Maryland?
Yes, we brokered customers between suppliers and themselves so that throughout this year prior to knowing that, we usually, if I could back up and say, we normally will campaign or market one area at a time. It's easier for the account managers to understand that market better and kind of be in a flow with how to help customers understand their bill or answer questions and be familiar with that specific market, and then we'll move on to another market. So we did do one Maryland campaign in the time frame between when the license was canceled for not having a surety bond, which, as I mentioned, we had sent the money and paid for and thought it was handled. And finding out that you guys don't have a license, we immediately stopped.
Okay. So, was the campaign completed at that point, or was it still?
It probably lasted, usually they're about 5 or 6 weeks or so. Yes.
So you weren't in the position of in the middle of a campaign attempting to explain to consumers that they can't broker through you anymore because your
Right.
license is
So
suspended.
yes, the reality of how that looks from our working perspective is we were when we found out, I do not believe we were in the middle of a Maryland campaign per se and pulled out. We just never went back there or called anybody in Maryland or marketed again until we got this taken care of.
All right. And without giving me specific numbers, roughly how active is your company in Maryland?
So I can tell you, we sold a few hundred customers in Maryland. We brokered a few hundred, 300 approximately, 340. I think the number's in there, somewhere around 314, I believe
Okay.
was.
All right, thank you. That's
Yes,
all I-
thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Richard.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Hovey, for being here today, and I appreciate your making that effort. Can I just ask staff, just as far as, and I know there's some of this information is something that's confidential, but just kind of help me how we arrived at the fine, the level of the fine, because it is quite a bit more than previous fines. You kind of hint at, why it is because of the non-communication and I guess revenue scale, but is that generally where you started? But can you help me understand how you got to the number of $10,000?
Sure, Commissioner. So, staff uses a formula to arrive at fines that assigns weights to the company's revenues, as well as, and it also considers the number of years, whole number of years that approximately they were operating without a license, and the fixed number of assessments. Aside from that, in the past, you may recall on the comments, I mentioned staff noted a previous fine that the commission issued $2,500 for the act of operating without a license alone. In this case, staff assigned a price tag to both operating without a license as well as waste of staff resources, essentially with the ignored communication attempts related to the bond. So it's the combination of both operating without a license and being somewhat of a lack of responsibility with the license when the company had it. So staff doesn't feel strongly about this specific number, but staff felt it necessary to include both factors in the decision.
Okay, thank you for that, and I would appreciate that the non-responsiveness would be serious. Does anything change in your thinking today, just for the fact that the company is represented here today, and also a better understanding of what transpired? Would that level of fine still be your recommendation, or would these circumstances change anything in how you view the recommendation you've given us to?
Yes, Commissioner. I'm thankful to Mr. Hovey for coming from Chicago on such short notice. He has been sincere in his presentation, I think. So at the end of the day, staff would be fine with a lesser penalty than $10,000. At the end of the day, staff's goal is to ensure that it's apparent that there is a penalty for both for operating without a license and also causing unnecessary use of staff resources.
Yeah, and I agree with that, and I think you've all done a very good job in this, and I applaud you for everything you've done up to this point. If you were to give us in the alternative number, do you have something in mind? Given your statement that you would look to a lesser amount?
Perhaps 6,000.
Okay. All right. Thank you. And Mr. Chairman, I would just like to propose that maybe in the alternative we consider staff's new fine recommendation for your consideration.
Commissioner O'Donnell.
Mr. Chairman, I oppose that notion. I think the severity of operating in the state of Maryland without a license as a third-party provider is severe, very severe. And I've already commended the broker, the company, for their sincerity and their presence. But I got to tell you, we got to send a strong message. This is not acceptable behavior. It's not acceptable to act in this manner contrary to law and contrary to regulation. And I oppose the reduction of the staff's original recommendation strongly.
I align myself with the comments of Commissioner O'Donnell. Do any other commissioners wish to speak? Seeing none, I would move that we grant the company a license to operate as an electricity supplier in the state of Maryland, limited to broker services for the customer classes and service territories applied for and recommended by staff. I move that we direct the company to pay a civil penalty in the amount of $10,000 to the commission and direct the company to file notice with the commission within 30 days of any changes to the information in its application. The vote begins with Commissioner Bubar,
Aye.
Commissioner Linton,
Aye.
Commissioner O'Donnell,
Aye.
and Commissioner Richard.
I vote aye, but I would have preferred to go with the alternative recommendation of staff. So, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. I vote aye. The motion is approved. Mr. Hovey, you'll be getting some paperwork and an order from the commission. You'll have 30 days to pay the fine. If you have any questions, please contact Mr. Herbert.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, next item on the agenda, item number 4, is Potomac Electric Power Company filed revised tariff pages. The company proposes changes to the residential service connection charges.
Good morning, Mr. Sproul.
Morning, Chairman and Commissioners. Brett Sproul on behalf of staff. On August 3rd, 2022, the Potomac Electric Power Company, or PEPCO, filed revised tariff pages to update the residential service connection fees for single-family homes and townhomes. In this filing, PEPCO calculates service connection fees separately for townhomes and single-family homes. Previously, PEPCO service connection fee filings utilize a combination of estimated and actual cost data for its fee calculations, and staff raised numerous improvements that could be made once PEPCO is able to provide only actual cost data. These improvements include a different outlier detection methodology and further separated service connection fees for both townhomes and single-family homes, depending on specific cost characteristics. The updates being made in this filing mark the first year that PEPCO is able to utilize 3 years of actual cost data for the most recent 3-year period in their service connection fee calculations. With 3 years of actual cost data available, staff is finally able to analyze the cost trends and calculation methodology to determine if new methodologies are prudent. In PEPCO's proposal, the company removes outliers from the data sets used to calculate the service connection fees based on a $10,000 total cost cutoff point. This means that any service connection project that has a total cost greater than $10,000 is removed from the dataset used to calculate the service connection fees. Staff believes that this $10,000 outlier cutoff point is not statistically supported and asserts that a mean and standard deviation approach to removing outliers would be advantageous. Staff recommends that the Commission accept staff's proposal for the company to detect and remove outliers that are 2 standard deviations away from the mean of the data, thus removing, in theory, roughly 5% of the data points. For townhome service connections, PEPCO proposes to calculate service connection fees based on the average total cost per service connection of the past 3 years of service connection data. PEPCO's proposed fee for townhomes equates to $2,228 per service connection. By analyzing the actual service connection cost data for the past 3 years, staff was able to ascertain that there were 2 different cost trends for townhome service connections, dependent on whether the customer installed their own service connection conduit or not. In this instance, customer refers to the developers that are building the townhome development. Using this information, staff was able to separate the townhome service connection data into 2 data sets, one for if the customer installed their own conduit, and one for if the customer did not install their own conduit. Staff then determined the service connection fee of each data set by calculating the average total cost per service connection for each respective data set, and applying the applicable gross-up tax rate. This resulted in 2 different service connection fees for townhomes. For townhome customers that install their own conduit, the service connection fee would be $671.88, and for townhome customers that do not install their own conduit, the service connection fee would be $2,940.12. Staff recommends that the Commission accept staff's proposal of 2 different service connection fees for townhome customers, one if the customer installs their own conduit, and one if the customer does not install their own conduit. For single-family home connections, PEPCO proposes to calculate service connection fees based on the average total cost per service connection of the past 3 years of service connection data. PEPCO's proposed fee for single-family homes equates to $3,975 per service connection. By analyzing the actual service connection cost data for the past 3 years, staff was able to ascertain that there were two different cost trends for single-family home service connections, dependent on whether the service connection length is greater than 75 feet or not. Using this information, staff was able to separate the single-family home service connection data into two data sets, one for service connections that were less than or equal to 75 feet, and one for service connections that were greater than 75 feet. For service connections less than or equal to 75 feet, staff determined the service connection fee by calculating the average total cost per service connection and applying the applicable gross-up tax rate. For service connections greater than 75 feet, staff determined the service connection fee by calculating the average total cost for connections less than or equal to 75 feet, plus a per-foot charge for the length of the service connection that is over 75 feet. This resulted in two different service connection fees for single-family homes. For single-family homes that have a service connection length less than or equal to 75 feet, the service connection fee will be $3,163.81. For single-family homes that have a service connection length greater than 75 feet, the service connection fee will be different for each individual customer's service connection, depending on how much greater the service connection length is over 75 feet. Staff recommends that the Commission accept staff's proposal of two different service connection fees for single-family homes, one for if the service connection length is less than or equal to 75 feet, and one for if the service connection length is greater than 75 feet. Staff has analyzed Pepco's residential service connection fees and recommends that the Commission accept for filing the company's proposed tariffs using staff's service connection fee calculation methodology proposals for townhome service connections and single-family home service connections. Staff additionally recommends that the Commission require Pepco to file clean copies of the revised tariff pages inclusive of staff's proposed updates and language regarding these service connection fee changes. Moving forward, staff is also open to meeting and communicating with Pepco and OPC in order to have discussions to go over the specific technicalities of the service connection fee calculations. Thank you, and I'm available for questions.
Thank you for the analysis and the time that was put into this buck sheet. Looking forward to hearing from the other parties here, starting with Office of People's Counsel.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. Jacob Auslander on behalf of the Maryland Office of People's Counsel. We filed
Mr. Auslander, could you pull the microphone a little bit closer to you?
The whole piece might have to come closer.
Is that better?
Thank you. Yes.
All right. Well, good morning. Jacob Auslander on behalf of the Maryland Office of People's Counsel. We filed an administrative letter on Monday requesting that the Commission adopt Pepco's filed rates rather than the proposal submitted by staff. Since we filed that letter, we have had an opportunity to have a conversation with Pepco and with staff, and we are prepared now to support staff's proposal. With the understanding that the parties will continue discussions on refinements, particularly to the fees that would be charged to townhome customers that have not installed their own conduit. That was the main sticking point that we flagged in our administrative letter with staff's original proposal. There was language in the buck sheet that suggested that staff recognized that there were certain cost trends that should be explored further, and staff and Pepco have expressed a willingness to further discuss this matter. So we're prepared to support staff's position as filed.
Thank you, Mr. Auslander. Clarified things greatly. We'll turn to counsel for the utility.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. Matthew Seegers appearing for Pepco. The company has reviewed staff's buck sheet, and we have no opposition to staff's recommendations. And as both staff and OPC have commented, we are certainly willing to work with both staff and OPC going forward to see if any additional refinements are needed to how these fees are calculated. Also, I neglected to mention, appearing with me today is Mr. John Caroma, our subject matter expert on this matter. So with that, we are available if you have any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Seegers. If I heard you right, the utility is indifferent to whether we adopt the utility's proposal or staff's proposal?
That's correct, Your Honor.
Is this effectively a net zero-sum game for the utility?
I'm not sure if we can say, looking forward, what the rate effect is, because the way these rates are calculated is that it's a 3-year look back. And this is the first time where we have had 3 years of actual costs. In the prior years, there was at least 1 year, if not more, where the costs were estimated. Now that we have 3 years of actual costs, now we would certainly understand why this would be an opportune time to try and modify how the rates are calculated. But unfortunately, I don't think I can say what specific impact it's going to be on the utility. It's just it's a fixed rate going forward.
Thank you. Well, similar to the principles of rate design and cost causation, I think that our staff make a good argument here for why homeowners with and without conduit should pay more or less rather than an average. But this conversation should continue into the future as we get more data, more actuals, and modify the per unit average cost as experience guides us. So I would be supportive of staff's proposal today. I turn to my colleagues. Commissioner Bubar.
I just want to thank Mr. Sproul. It's clear that your economics degree has come in handy and that you understand the principles of cost causation, and thank the parties for continuing to have dialogue. So this is a good outcome.
Thank you. Seeing no other commissioners wishing to speak, I would move that we accept for filing the company's proposed tariff using staff's service connection fee calculation methodology proposals for town home service connections and single-family service connections, and direct the company to file clean copies of its revised tariff pages, inclusive of staff's proposed updates and language regarding the service connection fee changes, with an effective date of today, October 26, 2022. The vote begins with Commissioner Bubar.
Aye.
Commissioner Linton.
Aye.
Commissioner O'Donnell.
Aye.
And Commissioner Richard.
Aye.
I vote aye. The motion is approved.
Next item on the next item on the agenda, Mr. Chairman, is item 5. It's Baltimore Gas and Electric Company filed its supplement 688 to Maryland PSC E6 and supplement 489 to Maryland PSC G9. It's base distribution revenue offset riders.
Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Baker.
Good morning, Chairman and Commissioners. Benjamin Baker on behalf of staff. First, when preparing to present this item, I determined that the gas distribution bill impacts in Table 10 of our comments was wrong. The corrections are: the first row should have been a monetary impact of $3.08 with an associated 5.8% increase. Then that's for residential. The second row was $30.52 with a 9.23% increase. Row 3 was supposed to be 81 cents with a 1.52% increase. And finally, row 4 was supposed to have been $8.36 with a 2.53% increase. These updated values will not change our recommendation. On September 15th, 2022, Baltimore Gas and Electric filed revised electric and gas distribution tariffs to set the base distribution revenue offset rider for both gas and electric to 0 for the third year of the company's multi-year base rate case. In both years 1 and 2 of BG&E's MYP pilot, the Commission authorized the use of full or partial revenue offsets such that BG&E's MYP authorized rates did not go into full effect. Staff supports BG&E's recommendation to set the distribution offsets to 0 for the third year of the MYP. Staff believes it is appropriate to set these rider to 0 for both gas and electric, as it is likely that any rate offset this year will be compounded on top of an unknown rate increase in 2024 when the company completes its next required base rate case. This minimizes uncertainty in the future for rates and ratepayers. Additionally, the continued use of the offset rider limits the long-term future value of the deferred tax benefits that we are currently using for effectively a one-year benefit. Staff notes OPC filed comments requesting to continue the offsetting the rates for rate year 3. For the reasons stated, staff does not support this request. Therefore, staff recommends the Commission accept the electric tariff and gas tariff revisions for filing with an effective date of January 1st, 2023. Thank you, and I'm available for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Baker. We'll turn to Office of People's Counsel.
Good morning, Chairman and Commissioners. I'm Michael Sammartino on behalf of Office of People's Counsel. We agree with staff at the company that it's appropriate to discontinue distribution rate offsets for electric customers, but disagree when it comes to gas distribution rate offsets. And we recommend that the Commission should approve a partial 25% offset for gas distribution incremental revenue requirement for all 3 years of the MRP for 2023. The current economy is squeezing gas customers, and the conditions that justified this Commission's approval of offsets for the first 2 years of BGE's MRP still remain. Gas commodity prices remain high due to an ongoing global energy crisis. Record high inflation is still persistent, and it's kept the cost of consumer goods up for the entire year. And though we don't hear about it as much in the news anymore, the pandemic is still ongoing, and current COVID case counts this month and are around the same levels as they were last year. And if anything, all these, the economic climate, circumstances relating to COVID, the effect of this on energy consumers is evidenced in BGE's recent arrearages report filed in PC 53. Arrearages are up in their August report. Arrearages greater than 60 days are higher than they were in August of last year. OPC recognizes and shares the Commission's concerns regarding the continuation of rate offsets. We understand that masking the actual cost of service through an offset frustrates the Commission's goals of transparency, predictability, and certainty that underlie its approval of BGE's MRP in the first place. We also understand that just approving continued offsets and immediate rate relief now comes at the expense of possibly higher distribution costs in the future. And we also are acutely aware that approving offsets, that continue with offsets for 2023 may lead to a sharper rate increase the next time distribution rates change. OPC's position is that continuing with an offset, but to a lesser degree, for 2023 strikes the right balance between providing immediate relief for gas customers, but still addressing the concerns of the long-term impact of continuing to accelerate tax benefits. And BGE helpfully provided OPC with a bill impact analysis model that we were able to use to run some numbers. And our recommendation of a 25% offset for the incremental revenue requirement for each year of BGE's MRP would limit winter distribution bill increases to less than $4.50 for an average winter customer's bill, but would still preserve some tax benefits for future rate relief. Mr. Chairman, Maryland gas customers are hurting, and even a few dollars saved on winter bills this coming year would have an appreciable and a noticeable impact. With that, I thank you for your time and consideration of our comments, and am happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Sammartino. We will next hear from the company, and then we may have questions for you.
Good morning, Chairman Stanek and Commissioners. Beverly Sikora on behalf of BGE. I also have Lynn Fiery and John Frayne with me today if we get into any hardcore math questions. We read staff's comments and OPC's comments, and we certainly understand the position that OPC puts forward. I just would like to remind the Commission, though, that last year when we were before you trying to set the offset for 2022, the way they were set in 2022 was to have then, it had it so that the increase in 2022 and 2023 were kind of equal, so that we were doing a step increase in equal amounts. To now kind of take a step back, OPC's proposal would actually take a bit of a step back, and we would not have a proportional increase, or not have the same increase in 2023 as we did in 2022 for gas. So that's just something else for you to consider.
Thank you, Ms. Sikora. I think we all sympathize with the concerns that Office of People's Counsel articulated just a a moment ago. $4.50 may not be a lot to some customers, but it may make the difference to others. Mr. Sammartino helpfully articulated a number of the contrary concerns, including rate shock, the fact that this gravy train isn't going to run forever. There's only so much tax credits left in the bucket. We've exhausted the majority at this point. Ms. Sikora, how much is remaining? 12 million? Was it?
Good morning, Chairman and Commissioners. John Frayne for BGE. There's just about $30 million, just over $30 million left on the gas side. There's more on the electric side, but we can't mix those. So there's about $30 million for gas.
Understood. This commission has already made the decision to wean customers off of these tax credits, and we made that decision earlier. And Mr. Sammartino accurately notes that the fact is these tax credits have masked and obscured the rates that BGE customers have been paying for the past couple of years. Customers may think, oh, this rate increase hasn't been so bad. And that's because we've masked a lot of it. Ms. Sikora, the first year, did we mask like 50% or 100%? 100%. Customers saw no price signals because there was no rate increase from their perspective. And I know my former colleague, Mindy Herman, this was a major point of hers. We've approved a 3-year, multi-year rate plan to allow for transparency, and the rate impacts were 100% non-transparent. I'm also concerned with rate shock, this cliff. If we don't hew towards our earlier decision, there will come a time in the not too distant future where rates will increase more dramatically than had we not continued the use of these tax credits. And for those reasons, I do support the staff's recommendation. I turn to my colleagues. Commissioner Richard, and then Commissioner Bubar.
Mr. Sammartino, do you have any? You heard the chairman articulate, I think, things that are definitely on all of our mind. Well, I can't speak; it's on my mind as well. But I was, heavily influenced by your, noting that the commodity prices are particularly bad this year. We're looking at a very unusually high period of inflation. Given the concerns about this masking and future rate shocks, can you maybe help me in the balance why we should go ahead and this particular relief might be appropriate under these circumstances?
Yeah, sure. So it's not empty rhetoric when we say we appreciate, we understand and we share the concerns about the impact of these offsets. We in a perfect world, where barring a pandemic, barring a global energy crisis spurred by a sudden invasion of a foreign country by Russia, we had extraneous circumstances not interfered with the current economy and energy prices, we would 100% agree that it'd be inappropriate to continue offsetting rates for 2023. I think OPC's position is coming from we're a little torn on this. We're trying to strike the right balance between providing immediate relief and insulating our clients from future excessive rate increases. So we feel that the 25% offset strikes the right balance. That said, we did run some numbers to see what would happen if we offset only the incremental revenue requirement for year 1 at 25% and at year 2. And we looked at various different offset scenarios that would afford some amount of rate relief, but still preserve some tax benefits for the future. And I'm happy to share those numbers if you're interested. But I think that extraneous circumstances do warrant continuing to provide some relief to customers, even if it comes with the result of offsetting the result that the actual cost of service for gas customers that was the commission approved, never has gone completely into effect.
Right, thank you.
Commissioner Bubar.
Oh, this is a tough one. Ms. Sikora, could you maybe provide a little bit more information about the comment you made about what the decision that the commission made last year?
You know, we were looking at there was no increase the first year, and, we knew at the end of the third year we needed to get to the full point of, the full increase that the commission had awarded. And so the offsets were set so that you had basically the same increase from 2021 to 2022 as 22 to 23. So it was meant to kind of get, I'm probably not explaining this one, if Lynn or John can explain it any better. It was meant to be that the increase over those 2 years was the same, so that it wasn't, 1 year there was a disproportional increase over the other year.
So going with OPC's recommendation, that would be the case. There would be a disproportionate
Yes, there
between the
would
two.
have actually been more of an increase in the 2022 than there will be in 2023.
Thank you. It's so challenging because, not having the transparency is really troubling, but I understand the impact that it's going to have. Can anybody give any indication if we would go with the OPC's recommendation, what might next year look like?
We come in to file our next MYP in probably February of 2023. We're starting to look at that. But again, with everything that is going on, for the foreseeable future, we're not seeing costs go down. The commodity rates, we're certainly hopeful, but there's no indication that next year is going to be better, significantly better. There's also no, indication that inflation, which is, hitting all costs pretty much, is going to be any better. So, I think if we felt like next year was, there was something that told us that next year was going to be better, and that, we wouldn't be facing these same, these challenges, it might influence our decision. But, if things are just going to get worse or at least not get better, it just doesn't seem appropriate to, continue to provide this offset because, as everyone has indicated, they will run out. They're not indefinite. And so at a certain point, customers will have to face, an increase that, will be even larger than it would be if we could maybe save some of those for the future.
Thank you. That was what I was thinking and how it would be. So the hurt would be even more going forward. Thank you.
Commissioner O'Donnell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I kind of following along the same lines. Mr. San Martino, could you take the microphone again? So I normally wouldn't go down this line of questioning, but you kind of prompted me to. You mentioned a war in Europe as being causation. But that could end tomorrow. Could end soon. It's a matter of decisions that will be made on that continent and around the world. But how about the policy decisions that are being made in this country that are driving these factors? You don't mention them. And I'm going to mention them. Cutting off a pipeline in this country that would help mitigate the energy costs. Turning off permitting at the EPA for fossil fuel extraction in this country. We're developing, I think, 3 million barrels a day less than what we had been just 2 years ago because of these policy decisions. Do you see any end to any of that policy in the next 2 years? Any of it? Because, look, In my opinion, all of this is caused by the cost of energy. And that's the sector we're dealing in right now, including this filing. And the cost of energy has been intentionally driven higher. Nobody wants to say it, but it's been intentionally driven higher to retard the use of fossil fuels. And that's a fact. And I challenge anybody to dispute it. It's the same reason we drove the cost of tobacco higher, to reduce its usage. And it's the same reason we're driving the cost of energy, not me, but we as a democracy who elected this leadership, is driving the cost of fossil fuels higher. Do you see any end to that anytime soon? I don't.
Mr. Commissioner, I can't speak to what policies the Biden administration may or may not do over the next 2 years. OPC's main concern is what's influencing rising commodity prices currently, and this is, the Biden administration's policies aside. The Russia's invasion of Ukraine upended global energy markets.
Yeah, that's a smokescreen. I don't go there. That's a smokescreen. It's not the real reason. What started all this was policy decisions made in January of 2021. That's a fact. And nobody likes to say it in polite company, and darn it, I'm going to say it. So don't go to Ukraine.
Well, the Biden administration's policies notwithstanding, OPC is concerned about the immediate impact of high commodity costs on
I
customers.
get it, and I appreciate that. But my point is, it's not going away. You're going to have the same problem next year and the year after.
Understood, Mr.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any additional comments? Seeing none, I would move that we accept the revised tariff pages for filing with an effective date of January 1st, 2023. The vote begins with Commissioner Bubar.
Aye.
Commissioner Linton.
Aye.
Commissioner O'Donnell.
Aye.
And Commissioner Richard.
Aye.
I vote aye. The motion is approved.
It was a hard one.
Next item on the
Pretty easy for me.
Well, I'm going to explain my vote real quick because giving immediate relief, that is something we need to keep in mind. It's going to be a very tough year, but I think more important, we have to think about the fact we are going to have a rate case next year, and prices are only going up. So I'm concerned more about maybe more of a smoothing of that increase in prices, and I think the decision we make today will hopefully contribute to that. But thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary.
Next item number 6, is Southern Maryland Electric Cooperative, Inc. filed its request for approval of a battery storage pilot program.
Good morning, Mr. Wilson.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. DeAndre Wilson here on behalf of staff. Pursuant to the Energy Storage Pilot Project Act, the Commission issued order number 89240 in case 9619, establishing an energy storage pilot program. According to the Act, the energy storage pilot project applications require Commission approval and must contain a list of information that is described in the applicable law section of staff's buck sheet. On August 25th, 2022, SEMECO filed a request to establish an energy storage pilot program consistent with the criteria outlined in the order and the Energy Storage Pilot Project Act. The cooperative is looking to install a battery energy storage system up to 4 megawatts at a duration of 16 megawatt hours at an allotted substation project area located at its Chaptico distribution substation in Mechanicsville, Maryland. The cooperative will be seeking to utilize either the utility-only model or the utility and third-party model. The proposed use case will be to peak shave, which SEMECO will obtain by dispatching the battery during defined peak periods, thereby reducing its peak demand profile and reducing its supply, its capacity, and transmission costs. As a result, the cooperative will reduce its greenhouse gas emissions, which supports the state's overall public policy goals. Other benefits include operational experience and operational and capacity savings, which include reliability, resiliency, and infrastructure deferral. The secondary application of the battery system will be to provide temporary backup substation power at the Chaptico substation in the event the 69 kV station source feed or power transformer becomes de-energized because of a contingency event. SEMECO is a cooperative and did not participate in case 9619, nor did it submit an energy storage pilot program for approval to the Commission because it believed that the order and the act was only applicable to investor-owned utilities. Although the final order in case number 9619 specifies investor-owned electric companies, Public Utility Article 7-216L provides that pilot programs approved under the Act may not preclude any other investment by a public service company in energy storage. As an electric cooperative, SEMECO is a public service company as defined in PUA 1-101Z. As such, the fact that the pilot program approved by order number 89240 under PUA 7-216 is limited to investor-owned utilities, it cannot be a basis for limiting any investment in energy storage under the proposed pilot program requested by SEMECO. By granting SEMECO's request, the cooperative will have to issue a request for proposals and, after receiving responses, conduct the required analysis, select the optimal storage model, and file an application with the Commission for approval to develop the project, which will allow staff and other stakeholders an opportunity to review the application for consistency with the state policies and goals and for cost effectiveness. In summary, staff concludes that granting SEMECO the authority to conduct its own energy storage pilot may present additional opportunities for the cooperative to obtain experience and knowledge regarding the construction and operation of energy storage facilities, which will assist the state in reaching its clean energy and greenhouse gas reduction goals. In conclusion, staff recommends the Commission approve SEMECO's request to establish an energy storage pilot as described in its filing.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson. Is counsel for the Solar Energy Industries Association present? No. All right, I do note that they did file a letter on the record. Mr. Quinn, good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. Brian Quinn on behalf of SMECO today, and I have representatives of the company with me if you have any additional questions. We agree with staff's buck sheet, and seeing your mention of the SIA comments, Mr. Chairman, we have one adjustment to make. SMECO would be willing to consider a third-party ownership model. So instead of just two ownership models, as we indicated in our letter, we'd be willing to consider a third-party ownership. This is very early days. We're just asking for approval of a pilot right here. We're going to have to come back. Got to dip our toe in the water, get some responses to RFPs, and see where we come out before we proceed with our next step, which would be to come back to the Commission with a proposal. So if that helps at all, we'd like to make that offer.
Thank you, Mr. Quinn. Any questions, Commissioner O'Donnell?
To the cooperative, are you familiar with East Point Energy?
Am I familiar with East Point?
Not you, as a cooperative familiar with East Point Energy.
Give me 1 minute, Mr. Chairman, Madam Commissioner.
Morning, Chairman, Commissioners. Jeff Shaw, Vice President, Distributed Energy Sustainability for SMECO. Yes, sir, I'm well aware of East Point Energy.
Are you doing business with them?
We are not.
Are you contemplating doing business with them?
No.
For the edification of the commission, tell us what East Point Energy does.
East Point Energy is a battery storage company. They have made requests for interconnection within our grid, but none of their projects are to be owned, operated, or anything to do with SMECO.
But your council just said you would entertain a third-party ownership proposal.
We would, but their proposals before us, and I guess I could put this out on the record, are 10 megawatts or greater, which would well exceed anything that's been done under Maryland pilot standards today.
Well, I think their projects are scalable and they're modular.
They are.
I'm trying to figure out why the cooperative all of a sudden wants a pilot when it didn't participate in the original proceedings per the statute. Understood. But I'm trying to figure out, like, there are third-party suppliers out there willing to do this work, and they don't need a pilot to do it. They're willing to do it.
They are, but in their kind of proposal, we would not gain any experience with their owned operated model.
Why wouldn't you? They're connecting to your system. You'd gain just as much experience. They're connecting to your system.
But from an operations perspective within SMECO, we would not.
But you already said you're considering a third-party operational model.
There's a potential there, yes.
You're contradicting yourself, sir.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to vote against this proposal just out of principle, because I don't think we're being told the whole story here, and I think there's something else going on, and I don't know what it is. I can't put my finger on it, but the responses to my questions are not giving me any comfort.
Mr. Quinn, anything to add in response to Commissioner O'Donnell?
I'm going to try to give Commissioner O'Donnell some comfort. I don't know if I'm going to succeed, but Commissioner O'Donnell, it is under the law and under the other pilot programs, utility ownership is a consideration. It's a considered model. It's an allowable model. There's no reason to deny SMECO the ability to at least investigate whether a utility-owned model will work. They're available to the other utilities, and we think it's only appropriate to be available.
Is there anything in the law that prohibits the cooperative from doing this with a third party without our action? Is there anything that prohibits it?
No, sir, nor is there anything
Good.
prohibited.
Then why do you need our imprimatur to do this if you could do it anyway? Except we're kind of saying you can bake this into your rates because we're approving it.
Well, we're early days again, as I said, Commissioner O'Donnell. This is the path that the legislature and the commission has laid forward, and
I don't think the legislature laid this forward. They didn't put you in the law. I don't think that's true. They didn't put the cooperative in the law.
Well, it's a path that we've seen.
You can do it without our approval.
Quite frankly, so could the investor own.
Right.
Okay.
But the legislature specifically told the investor owns to go forth and provide pilots. They didn't tell you to do that. And you don't need our approval to do it. So your arguments, with all due respect, Mr. Quinn, don't give me comfort.
At this point, I will propose a motion adopting the staff recommendation.
Mr. Chairman?
I'm sorry.
Sorry,
Commissioner Linton, yes.
I just had a just a clarification question for the company. In your proposal on page 9, you specifically say you'd consider one of two models, utility only or utility and third party model. So today, you're saying that you would do that, what you already said you would do, or are you saying something extra?
Now, to be clear, Commissioner O'Donnell, on page 9, yeah. Oh, pardon me, Commissioner
Sorry,
Linton.
we get confused.
Sorry,
People confuse us all together.
We're brothers.
I got Delegate O'Donnell on my mind.
Happens all the time.
Commissioner. Now, Commissioner Linton, that's the two models we mentioned in our letter are both utility and then utility / third party, and then the third model we're talking about adding today's strictly third party ownership.
Strictly third. Okay,
Yeah.
I didn't hear that part.
Yep.
Okay. All right. Thank you. That's all.
Yep. Yes, sir.
At this point, I will propose a motion that we approve the cooperative's request to establish an energy storage pilot program. The vote begins with Commissioner Bubar.
Aye.
Commissioner Lipton.
Aye, but just to be clear, Mr. Chairman, I do think there's some merit to what Commissioner O'Donnell is suggesting, that there might be an option for the company to do this without our engagement, but they're here, so they've asked, so.
And I do think that option exists, and I believe council acknowledges.
Yes, sir.
Commissioner O'Donnell.
No, Mr. Chairman, and I think this is a prejudgment of a rate increase that the ratepayers of Southern Maryland Electric Cooperative will bear, and I don't think the commission should be doing this, so I vote no.
Commissioner Richard.
I vote aye, and I appreciate the company bringing this for our consideration today, and I look forward to seeing your proposals. And for me, it was important that you actually proactively took into consideration to see comments, and so I look forward to hopefully getting a couple of different models maybe in the near future. So thank you. I vote aye.
I vote aye. The motion is approved.
Next item on the agenda is item number 7. It's Kiefer Funk LLC filed its request to extend its construction and operational deadlines. It's in case 9495.
Good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. Roger Austin on behalf of staff. On November 14th, 2019, the Commission issued an order granting Kiefer Funk LLC a Certificate of Public Convenience and Necessity, CPCN, to construct an 11.80 megawatt solar photovoltaic generating facility in Washington County. One of the conditions proposed by the Maryland Department of Natural Resources Power Plant Research Program and adopted in the Commission's order stipulated that construction of the project must commence within 3 years of receiving the CPCN and must be completed for operation no later than 4 years after receipt of the CPCN. If the project fails to meet either of these deadlines, the CPCN shall expire and no longer constitute authorization to construct and operate the project. Fast forward almost 3 years later, on September 20th, 2022, Kiefer Funk filed a request asking the Commission for a 3-year extension of the construction and operation deadlines in the CPC that are part of the CPCN conditions. In its request, the company claimed that it will be unable to meet its deadlines due to, quote, substantial interconnection scheduling delays by the utility Potomac Edison, unquote. Accordingly, staff followed up with PE and was able to determine that the utility was more than accommodating to Kiefer Funk throughout the interconnection process, has worked with Kiefer Funk through the project's repeated schedule changes, and has even experienced frustration in attempting to contact the project developer at various stages of the interconnection process. In its September filing for an extension, Kiefer Funk also stated that it had suspended the project in January 2022 in order to obtain local permits needed to advance the project. In following up on the status of its progress in obtaining these local permits, staff was able to determine that Kiefer Funk has not submitted any of the final documents necessary to receive approval of the various local permits needed to advance the project. On October 13, 2022, Kiefer Funk submitted a supplemental filing for its extension request. In its supplemental filing, Kiefer Funk stated that it wanted to, quote, clarify the delays were caused by the overall intricacies of the interconnection process and did not intend to place specific blame on PE, unquote. In this filing, Kiefer Funk provides a deadline of the project from October 2017 through January 2022, in which it discusses the various challenges it has faced in meeting its various obligations. Nevertheless, it remains concerning that Kiefer Funk has been largely aware of its various milestones for 5 years, but up to the present time has made scarcely any progress in achieving these milestones. All in all, staff believes that Kiefer Funk has misrepresented the causes for the delays, which then required staff to investigate a non-existent problem with the generation interconnection process. And apart from its inability to meet project milestones, Kiefer Funk even failed to respond to data requests in this matter within the customary 10 business days. Instead, Kiefer Funk responded after 17 business days and after 2 inquiries from staff asking when they were going to respond. Nevertheless, staff believes that granting Kiefer Funk's extension request will serve to support the state's renewable energy solar policy embodied in the Clean Energy Jobs Act of 2019. Staff concludes that the state's policy and goals with regard to renewable energy provides good cause for granting requests for extensions on CPCN construction and operation deadlines of solar photovoltaic power generating facilities. However, staff also concludes that Kiefer Funk's failure to meet its construction and operation deadlines was due to the company's own actions and inactions. Failure to abide by a CPCN condition is a violation of a commission order subject to civil penalties or the Public Utilities Articles, Section 13-201. To sum up, staff recommends that the commission grant the company's request for a 3-year extension of the construction and operational deadlines outlined within its approved CPCN for good cause. Staff also recommends that the company be assessed a civil penalty of $10,000 on the Public Utility Article, Section 13-201, due to the company's failure to meet the commission-imposed construction and operational deadlines. Or in the alternative, that the commission set a hearing to determine whether a civil penalty is appropriate and what the amount of the penalty should be.
Thank you, Mr. Austin. Some serious allegations there. We'll turn to counsel for PPRP. Ms. McElmore, good morning.
Good morning, Your Honor. PPRP takes no position on the penalties. However, we do not object to the approval of the request, and also request that the commission consider updating the conditions of the license to be more in line with what is currently the conditions in other cases.
Thank you, Ms. McElmore, and we did receive your redlined conditions.
Thank you.
Turn to counsel for Kiefer Funk LLC.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. David Bugelmans on behalf of Kiefer Funk LLC. I'm joined today by the full team here from Urban Grid. That includes Mr. Colin Mott, the Chief Operating Officer for Urban Grid, Mr. Jeff Hudson, the Interconnection Director for Urban Grid, and Mr. Kevin Clark, the specific project manager for Urban Grid for this project. Today you're going to hear from me that we disagree with many of staff's assertions, but I think it's important for the Commission to keep in mind that no party here opposes this extension, and even staff supports granting this extension today. Kiefer Funk has also reviewed...
So, Mr. Bugelmans,
yes,
perhaps we don't need to spend a lot of time on the extension request. All the parties agreed to that, but
okay.
I would spend more time responding to Mr. Austin's allegations.
Yes, Your Honor, and I plan to do that. I will say for the record that we've reviewed PPRP's proposed conditions. The project appreciates PPRP doing that. We support their adoption today. Moving to staff's comments. So first off, we need to address staff's assertion that the project misrepresented the reason for this extension, which is, I agree, very serious. The full history here is a few weeks after filing the request, Potomac Edison reached out to us, and rightfully so. You know, they had a concern with the way that we portrayed the utility. Effectively, we portrayed the utility in a bad light, and we took that very, very seriously because we knew we had to come before you, and everything we put before you needs to be correct. So we convened the full project team, the folks you see behind me, and what we did is we came up with a much more detailed narrative of the exact history of what happened with this interconnection. So they did that. We ran it by Potomac Edison to make sure that they were comfortable with all the facts in there, and that's what you have before you in our supplemental filing. What was clear to me when reviewing the supplemental filing was that the original narrative provided by Urban Grid was not incorrect, but in the interest of really just summarizing what happened, they condensed it down in such a way that it did portray the utility in a negative light. But it was clear to me from the additional information that really the issue here was a complicated interconnection process, working through complicated issues, complicated rules. When one party responded to another, it took time to respond, to get things back on track. The good news is, and I think this is further proof of good cause, is that as a result of these efforts, we now have a viable project. And I can tell you today that if this extension is granted, this project will be able, through an affiliate, will be financed and constructed. So, we regret the issue. It was important for us to clarify the record, and that's why we did the supplemental filing that you have before you. And again, respectfully, I think that demonstrates additional good cause. Moving on to staff's assertion that the project hasn't applied for local permits. There's really 2 points on this. First off, as we've seen with other projects, often when interconnection lags, it causes developers to kind of put a brake on things until that's resolved. So that certainly had an impact here. Another important point is the project has advanced local permits. Perhaps it hasn't done it as much as staff would prefer, but the project has moved things forward. It's submitted for conceptual stormwater plan review, conceptual site plan review with the county. The project has done the design work necessary to do the final site plan submittal, dealing with some difficult geology on the site that's particular to this site. And then the remainder of the permits listed in staff's buck sheet, building permits, grading permits, those are effectively ministerial permits. The project will pay a fee, and within 30 days, effectively, they'll get the permit. So it's just premature to have those at this time. So I just wanted to make clear for the record, the project has advanced local permits. Final issue, I know we're late in the day here, but the issue of the $10,000 penalty proposed by staff. Respectfully, we don't think the Commission has authority to impose a penalty on these facts under the Public Utilities article, and it's a fairly straightforward legal matter. If you look at Public Utilities Article 13201B, that provides the Commission can assess a penalty for the violation of a Commission order. And it's correct that these conditions are part of a Commission order, but these deadlines haven't lapsed. The construction start deadline is in November of this year. The operational deadline is a year after that. So respectfully, there has not been a violation of a Commission order here. And as far as the statute is concerned, I think that's the most authoritative piece on that. Assuming the Commission finds that it does have authority to issue a penalty here, I think it's important to think about how this extension request relates and compares to other extension requests. And the fact is, this is very similar to some other extensions the Commission's considered recently. For instance, the Dance Mountain Project in case number 9400, and the Cherrywood Solar Project in case number 9477. In both of those cases, the projects had either done very little or had not advanced local permits at all, but the Commission granted the extensions and didn't impose a penalty. And respectfully, I don't think staff has shown what's different here. We're also concerned about what a $10,000 signal will do in terms of a signal to the solar developer industry. In particular, if you look at the history of these conditions, these really originated from fossil fuel CPCNs. And I think that the idea with those is that after 3 years, when you're looking at air quality standards and best available controls, after 3 years it would make sense. If construction hasn't started, you have to come back. So MDE, PPRP, and the Commission can update the requirements on those facilities. And that's effectively what's happened here with PPRP's proposed updates. It's not air, but it's, I think it's fulfilling its purpose. But respectfully, I don't think the intent of these conditions historically has been an affirmative obligation to move forward no matter what, or else face a penalty imposed by the Commission. So I'll end there, but to summarize, Urban Grids advanced this project in good faith. We urge you to grant this extension request, adopt PPRP's proposed revisions to its conditions, or to the Commission's conditions, and reject staff's proposal for the $10,000 penalty. Thank you for your consideration. Again, we have the full team here to answer your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Bilgemans. Taking a look at the September 20th initial letter, I think it is fair to say that undue blame was placed on the utility. So I do appreciate the revised letter that was filed on October 13th. Mr. Austin outlined a litany of allegations, some of which you responded to. He noted that data requests were responded to a week or so late. Is that true?
I guess since you brought up the question, Mr. Chairman, staff didn't provide a deadline for these data requests. We didn't have a cover letter with it that had a 10 business day turnaround. Obviously, we try to get back to staff as quickly as we can, because if we don't respond, we can't get in front of you. And it's always, we're always trying to push these forward. So I regret that issue, but respectfully, there was no deadline placed on this. I am aware often it's 10 business days, but there is no attempt here to slow things down or cause any issues. We were trying to get a complete response as quickly as we could.
Mr. Austin, any response?
No.
Mr. Albert, for staff counsel, any response to Mr. Bugelman's argument that the Commission has no authority under 13201 to assess a penalty pursuant to the statute?
I have not looked at that one specifically. I can't opine right now.
I just looked at the statute, and I think it is clear that the Commission has the authority pursuant to an order to assess a fine of this amount in this case, so I would respectfully disagree with Mr. Bugelman's here on this point. I'll turn to my colleagues for additional questions. Commissioner O'Donnell?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To staff counsel first. Isn't the concept of nunc pro tunc to correct an omission in a judicial or procedural record?
As I understand nunc pro tunc, as it comes up here, it's where someone goes forward without authorization, and it's typically comes up here where that entity comes in and asks for retroactive authorization, if I'm understanding you.
So that's staff's understanding of it, and that's why I asked the question, because staff views this as an opportunity to rewrite history. You can't rewrite history with prunc no tunc. Nunc pro tunc. You can't rewrite history with it. And that's what you use it for. You want to say, well, we didn't do this, but we're going to say we did it. That's not what nunc pro tunc is. It's to correct an omission in the record that occurred, but didn't get in the record. And I've had this discussion with staff so many times, I'm tired of it. Staff needs to get off, and I see my friend sitting back there who's gone round and round with me on this, thinks it's a license to rewrite history, administrative history. It's not. And I don't know why does staff continue to insist that it is? I don't get it. Can you respond to that?
Well, I'm not sure I understand the context of that question.
I thought it was pretty clear. What don't you understand? Because we're gonna go up on this if you want. If you want to go up on this, we will.
Do you mean the nunc pro tunc in terms of renewing the
It's a
3-year deadline?
It's used to reference a judicial or procedural act that corrects an omission in the record, not an omission of performance. It's not a license to rewrite history. Is that clear to you?
Well, again, I've seen it used most commonly
By staff. I've seen it used here too.
where it authorizing something that was not an authorized action. You then come in for authorization.
Can use it to correct the record.
Retroactive.
You can use it to correct the record. You can't use it to rewrite history. You can't say we did this when you didn't do it. And that's what staff wants to do. With this notion of nunc pro tunc. It's not a license to rewrite history. It's a license to correct the record, to reflect what actually happened. And I don't understand why staff doesn't get that. That's my opinion. I get it. I'm not speaking for the commission, but I got to tell you, I think staff abuses nunc pro tunc. All right, let me go to the company. Mr. Bugelmans, you maintain that the commission doesn't have authority, and I'm kind of taken aback, kind of like the chairman. I agree with the chairman, by your assertion that the commission doesn't have authority to sanction when you haven't been responsive, when the company has not been responsive to this commission, and the authority of this commission clearly in the Public Utilities article. Why do you think we should be sympathetic to you, sir?
Well, Your Honor, the commission has broad authority to impose penalties for the violation of commission orders. But it's our position that because what we're talking about here are deadlines to begin construction and begin operations that have not passed, there has not been a
Not like
violation.
we've seen any of them before, right, Mr. Bugelmans?
Again, we're not trying to undercut the commission's authority, but there has not been a violation of a commission order.
Well, you haven't been
That's our
responsive. You haven't been responsive to our staff. Clearly, this company has not been responsive to our staff. To me, that's authority enough. Because if you're not responsive to us as the regulator, we have the authority to hammer you. And we have a heavy, heavy hammer if we want to use it. Not that we should, but we do have it. And you seem to say we don't. And I don't get it. You seem to also want to rewrite or reinterpret the concept of public convenience and necessity. In other words, these things don't apply to us, they apply to fossil generation. But a CPCN process is statutory and it does apply to you. Could you acknowledge that to us instead of saying it doesn't apply to us?
We acknowledge the CPCN requirement applies to this project. It's a solar facility over 2 megawatts. And that's why we're before you today requesting a modification to the
Did I misunderstand what you said, which is these things are based for fossil generation and not for us?
But the point, and perhaps I'm sorry if my explanation was confusing, but the point I was trying to make was that because I look back at the history of these, and I respectfully, I think the way the commission should consider thinking about these deadlines is that this is a requirement to come back to the commission, like many projects have done, if construction hasn't started by a certain time, to update the CPCN to reflect current requirements.
So
I'm
you're
trying to draw an analogy
suggesting that maybe we ought to have a hearing, a full-blown hearing on whether or not we should do that. I think that's what you're arguing for, and that's an alternative recommendation of the staff to set a hearing to determine whether a civil penalty is appropriate and what amount of penalty should be, and we could also entertain what CPCN conditions should apply, right?
we're not arguing for that, Your Honor.
You're arguing it. You're just not arguing for that solution. But it's a possibility. We have the authority to do that, right?
I guess technically, yes, Your Honor. I mean, you have authority to initiate proceedings, and we're not disputing that. And again, we're not trying to undercut the commission in any way. It's just that staff has accused this project of violating an order, and it's our position it hasn't.
You've blamed the utility, you've blamed the staff, and you're here begging for some solution to your own problems, your company's problems that you represent. And you kind of are undermining the authority of the commission when you say the commission doesn't have the authority, which some of us don't agree with. And yes, I'm taking you to task. because I'm tired of us not adhering to deadlines, and I'm tired of us having deleterious, in my opinion, excuses, whether it's the frozen tundra of Maryland or many other things, none of which are at the heart of any of this stuff. Mr. Chairman, I'm going to vote to levy a civil penalty, but I will not vote to grant the company's request for a 3-year extension.
Commissioner Bubar and then Commissioner Linton.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Bugelmans, for those explanations. That was very helpful, and thank you, staff. I guess I have a question for staff. If you look at 13201D on the determination of the amount for a penalty, it talks about the number of previous violations of any provision of this article, the gravity of the current violation. Can you give any explanation as to how you arrived at the amount?
Just one thing, I thought Mr. Austin could better do this, but I just quickly throw in one concern, and this came up just earlier today with the Hovey penalty, where this uses up resources of the commission and more specifically PPRP. You come forward and you get authorization for these projects, it triggers a whole bunch of reviews, especially by PPRP, well as this commission staff, the engineering staff. And the expectation is we're putting, PPRP and our engineering staff is putting in that analysis in that time because this project is moving forward on a timely basis. So when we see actions by the project that sort of delay things because of indecision perhaps, good faith granted in this case, but that causes a burden on the commission that was really unnecessary. So that's at least one factor. I'll defer to Mr. Austin.
Yeah. Notwithstanding what Mr. Albert said, we didn't apply any formula as Mr. Herbert did in the Hovey case earlier. I believe 25,000 is the maximum the commission can apply in this case, but we believe that 10,000 was enough to get the company's attention and also to serve as a warning to other companies that commission deadlines need to be adhered to.
Okay, thank you. I guess another question maybe for Mr. Bugelmans or the company. What's the path forward? I mean, obviously, there's a better understanding of issues with the utility. Just describe going forward. Is everything good in terms of clear understanding of who's got to be doing what and the timeframes for all those?
Yes, Your Honor. So the interconnection piece, for the most part, is resolved. We don't anticipate that causing any more delays or issues. With respect to local permitting, it's just a matter of completing those processes and obtaining financing and constructing the project. So at this point, the project does see a path forward, which clearly it's obviously why we're here today, to get an extension to be able to allow that to happen. The project is in the clear at this point to move forwards.
Okay, thank you. And then I just want to thank PPRP for what you had said. I had a question as to what was the basis for your additional conditions, but you answered my question, so thank you. That's all, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Linton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I agree with the chairman regarding the commission's authority to issue a fine here. Mr. Bugelmans, I know you've made the suggestion that there hasn't been a violation, and it is some good lawyering, but I think the completion of that would be there hasn't been a violation yet. Is that appropriate to say?
I think that is true. I mean, if the commission doesn't grant the extension today and then it lapses, the CPCN would expire. I think there would be a clear violation if the deadline passed, the project hadn't begun construction, then a year from now, begins construction. That would be a violation. But again, these are expiration deadlines where if they're not extended, the CPCN expires. So that's part of the argument I was making about what was the intent behind these conditions. Is that once you get a CPCN, the project has to begin construction within 3 years. It's a deadline for expiration. But that's a bit different than forcing it to move forward no matter what, or else be subject to a penalty. So it's a fine distinction, but hopefully that That makes some sense.
Well, I think the concern that I know some of my colleagues and the staff has raised ties around and you even touched on it too, ties around the notion of the signals that this agency sends when we grant a license, grant authority to take some action. That signal is not just sent to the industry, but it's sent to citizens in the community. Everybody needs to know that this project's going to move forward and that there is a competent and committed company operating it to the extent there's a third party doing so. So I mean, there are a lot of different issues here. I mean, even if the commission were to say yes to this waiver, this project still couldn't meet this deadline. There's a whole bunch of other approvals that have not been filed for, have not been obtained yet, and the same thing goes even with some of the conditions that have been established. There's a lot more work that needs to be done. So there is some signal here that we send by granting this, if we were to grant an extension here. Not just that we are committed to the state's conditions, but it almost makes it sound as though we're committed no matter what. You know, even if we get projects that have all kinds of internal challenges and don't appear to be fully operational. So how are we to know that that's where we are now, that the kinks are all ironed out, that the citizens in the community that may have questions about moving forward with this project? I had a chance to take a look online and I saw several customers that weren't happy about it. So how do we know now that we're saying to them, you know, we've granted this 3 years ago, they got all these challenges along the way, they came back and we gave them even more time. How do we know we got it right now?
Well, the company is confident it can meet the deadlines within 3 years. Again, it's at this point it's really technical, permitting, with the site plan and stormwater, erosion sediment control, those types of things. In terms of public input, those are public processes in which members of the public could participate, and any subsequent compliance filings that have to occur at the commission would also be public.
Yeah, well, we're obviously you already have the CPCN, so we're
Yeah.
past some of the consumer engagement regarding their input into the process. The point I was making is that those consumers were under the impression that the project was going to move forward at a particular timeline, and now they see that it's not because the timeline is about to elapse, and now the commission is giving more time. So we talked earlier about the signals that we send. Even earlier, we had another company here that was in a similar situation, and we fined them for what, comparatively speaking, I think would be a smaller situation than this one. I actually wouldn't support the $10,000 fine because, in my opinion, and I don't know if it's appropriate, I'd probably get kicked under the desk by our general counsel for saying this, but I think it would be bigger because I think the impact is more significant here. So I raised a question about the signal. I think it's, and I'm hopeful that there's a more to the answer. I mean, I'd like to hear from representative of the company that we know that this is moving forward now, not necessarily because of financing, but that all of the issues that we heard about that even led to the need to file a second filing, just to clarify that the communications with the company were not how they were originally represented. I mean, we need to know that this is going to work. And before we start sending signals to the industry that you can come in, ask for waivers even after your project's about to expire, and you can keep going, even though you've got a number of challenges here that prevented you from meeting the original commitments that the company made when we first came before us. So, I mean, like I asked the question, I guess, a second time. Are you ready now?
Yes, and the signal is heard loud and clear by both this developer. We have the full team here, and I think they would agree. They've heard the discussion today, and will take it seriously. And I'll already do, and I will continue to stress the importance of these deadlines, and that the commission looks at them extremely seriously and takes this very seriously. I can commit to you to do that. I've certainly heard the message.
I appreciate that, Mr. Bugles. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner O'Donnell.
I'm coming back, Mr. Chairman. I want to hear from one of the company principals, please. Who can entertain a line of questioning regarding financing of this project? Which one of you three are best equipped to do that?
I'm probably best equipped.
Okay.
If you could state your name for the record, please.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, Commission, Chairman Standing, Commission. My name is Colin Knott, Chief Operating Officer of Urban Grid Solar Projects. So I can certainly try to entertain.
Could you, I didn't hear your name, I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry, Colin Mott.
Colin Mott, okay, Mr. Mott, thank you.
Yeah, certainly.
So, please give me your honest assessment of where the financing of this project is, and please don't tell me what you think I want to hear, and please don't window dress it, just because I appreciate frankness.
Yes, sir.
Tell me what the financing of this project being successful is.
Sure, I can do that. Urban Grid up to somewhat recently has been a project developer, a solar developer that's developed projects, found owners and operators to construct, own, and operate the projects. We actually have a company that we have contracted with to own and operate this project, finance the construction, and that deal is in place at this time.
Well, Mr. Bugelman suggested that that was still another thing that had to be accomplished, should we grant the extension.
And there's some confidentiality related to that deal that I can't speak to, but yes, we have entered into that agreement.
So, Mr. Bugelman, can you come back to the microphone? Why did you tell me that financing was something that still had to be secured if the principal from the company is telling me it's already secured?
Well, I think it's a distinction without a difference, respectfully. This extension...
It's either secured or it's not. It's a binary question.
This extension is necessary for the project to move forward. And the project has a path forward. I was clear, the project will be able to obtain financing and be constructed if this is granted. So, respectfully, there's no inconsistency there.
So you say financing needs to be secured, the principal says it's secured already, and you say there's no difference. Why, as a layman, am I supposed to believe you, sir? There's two clearly different answers. Two clearly different things. You need to get it, you don't. They're different. You say there's no distinction. Mr. Bugelman, you're stretching my ability to give you the benefit of veracity. Mr. Chairman, I'm going to vote for a penalty. I'm not voting for the extension. I'd like to separate the question.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Richard.
Just so I understand from staff, in the alternative, you're suggesting we actually have a separate hearing, in that your alternative, so we can actually go into some of the details, I guess, and some of the legalities of how we proceed. Is that correct? Is that what?
Right.
Okay.
And again, yes, sorry, go ahead.
And at this point, do I understand that staff counsel is not prepared really to make a ruling on whether or not we have that authority? Is that correct?
To backtrack, and again, I apologize, I did not have the PUA in front of me. I should have. Under 13201, the projects have suggested, well, gee, if lots of projects come in for more time and you haven't treated them as a violation. Again, as Mr. Austin made clear in his buck sheet, this is not, the penalty is not about the delay per se. It's about the failure to pursue the project on a good faith basis. That's implicit in any authorization granted by the commission, especially when you're given a deadline to achieve it. So it's one thing, they cited case 9400 and 9477 and said no penalty there. There were no findings of bad faith or just lack of due diligence in pursuing the project. So I think the thought would be, if the commission's not comfortable with what they know now to impose a penalty, but thinks it's something where you need a more factual basis, that the alternative by staff is to set up that hearing.
Okay. But I did also hear that we do have this new kind of a updated timeline on how communications went. And believe me, I'm very sympathetic to staff. If you feel like you're not getting the information you need and the support, I want to make sure that you know that this commissioner, I always will stand behind the staff. But it seems like right now we do have some updates in how things transpired that might want to, weigh on our decision whether or not to proceed with a fine, and and what size of the fine. Suggest it might be even higher, but or whether to have it at all. So would that be a good reason, maybe at this point, with this new information we have today, and some of the concerns now raised by the applicant, or not applicant anymore, but the project developer, as to whether they're getting a fair opportunity to present their case specifically on the fine issue? Would that better be handled if we were to do this in a separate proceeding and possibly even a paper proceeding?
That's really the commission decision. Frankly, we're coming at this, there's not much precedent in this specific context.
Not much precedent. Okay, so
Okay.
we'd be just kind of ruling off the
We don't have
top of our head right here if we were to just go ahead and make
I
this
would-
decision today on.
Yeah,
on such a-
earlier today we had a supplier, unauthorized operations. We have a fairly steady stream of decisions that come out on that with respect to the penalty. We don't have that, and I guess the point here was to make a penalty big enough that it would bring them down to the administrative meeting as it exactly is done. We wanted to get their attention. I think whether it's, this is a large outfit, as we understand, they'll be able to absorb the hit from this penalty, but I think it does get their attention, and it does make clear, again, this is not the typical projects encountering delays, and we get that. The local permitting delays are very real, and that's the typical reason solar projects come in, and they're saying, we've done our best, but we're just not getting feedback from the county. Here, it's again a pattern of not acting diligently to get the authorizations, and frankly to make it worse than trying to shift blame to Potomac Edison or others.
Yeah,
So
and I appreciate that.
that's
That pattern is
played
what
out.
we want to, I think, maybe dig into a little more and find that out. And I think you've got their attention today. I think that's clear. But I am concerned is the attention we're getting from all the developers at this point, and how welcoming is Maryland to these important developers if we're going to succeed in our solar goals and our state policies. We need these developers, otherwise we are going to fail miserably. And I think what we've always also heard, this has been a very tough several years with the pandemic. We've got some supply chains issues. All of our counties are going through a lot right now as they try to figure out how they maneuver through their part of the responsibility in getting these projects up and running. So I also am very concerned about the attention that we might be getting for taking a hasty action today in this regard. So I want to say that I support your recommendation in the alternative that perhaps we take this important issue and set it aside, and perhaps go ahead and just. I'd like to act immediately on whether we're going to extend this contract or not. I'm sorry. Did you have?
Well, just quickly, I mean, I think you're very point that this commission needs to process these applications for solar projects as quickly as possible, because we have a state mandate. Makes it even more important that the projects pursue the project and the final design of the project and the local permits as diligently as possible, and that's the problem here. It's that this very need for the commission and PPRP to use their resources on projects that are going forward on a good faith basis, because they don't have limited resources. This was a situation that shouted out, that's not happening. They're not operating on a diligent way, and we need to make the message clear, and we viewed that as a $10,000 penalty to say that's not acceptable.
And I agree with you. I think that should be clear. We can't be wasting staff resources, and you need to, developers need to be responsive to you, and I stand 100% behind on you on that. Just could I ask the developer, and I mean, obviously, this is a long process. You do these projects, I'm guessing, in other states as well. But can you just help me? Already, I'm sure you put a lot of resources into this project, a lot of time, a lot of money. Can you just give me a flavor for just how much you've already put into this project? And because I think there's been some question as to, how seriously you're taking this.
Sure. Thank you for the question. And I'll turn some over to our project developer here who have more details on that. But just at a high level, yeah, I mean, we have been very involved in this project for a long time. I actually have personally been involved in this project for a long time. I worked with many of the folks on the Potomac Edison side as we've worked through these issues, gone out to site visits, cited the interconnection, worked through these challenges, and as a representative of the company, officer of the company, very concerned about all the stuff that we've heard today, the comments that have been made. The reputation of this company is very important to me. So, respectfully appreciate the questions and comments, and I understand absolutely the gravity of what we're here talking about today. So, thank you for the opportunity to talk. I'll turn it to Kevin Clark, our project developer, to talk.
Right, thank you.
Kevin Clark, project developer for Kiefer Funk LLC. So I think I'm going to be able to help you with that answer. So from a development standpoint, basically my charge.
This doesn't have to be exhaustive. I just want to get a flavor for
well,
just how much the company has already put into this project.
A real easy point is that the actual site has fairly difficult terrain. It's got a lot of topo, and I don't want to get too technical, but it also has some pretty substantial geotechnical issues. There's surface rock. So we've gone through, I believe at this point, I think we're on our 21st design for the actual PV site based on geology issues, slope issues, which causes a stormwater issue with the state of Maryland. So yeah, I believe we are at 21 now. I should have looked before I got here, but when I actually took over the project, which was about 3 years ago. I think we were on version 2. So in the last 3 years, we've redesigned.
Okay.
20 times.
And I appreciate it. Again, I know some of my colleagues here have some time constraints, and so I just wanted to give you just quickly an opportunity to get what kind of skin in the game you have already in this. That you are serious about developing this project.
We've got our preliminary approval from Washington County, and it kind of looks like that's where we stopped, but it really wasn't. We have to get our stormwater rounded up, we have to get our geotech dealt with, and then we submit our final site plan to Washington County. So that's
well, thank you.
You're quite welcome. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Commissioner O'Donnell has a follow-up.
Very briefly, because we do have a couple-minute time constraint. Is there anything on the record, Staff Counsel, that this commission has not processed these applications expeditiously in furtherance of state law?
Staff side, my understanding with speaking with staff is we have done everything we can to
Staff
offer
has and
addition-
commission has. I know we have, and it's an obvious question. So the suggestion that maybe we're not furthering state law or state policy goals as fast as we could has no basis. There's nothing in the record. We're pumping these things out. In fact, the reason we have deadlines is to expedite, not to delay, but to expedite the development of these projects. And yet we have a constant stream of delays because we need good faith partners who we authorize to do this. So it's not us, it's the developers and a constant string of developers who give us everything from the frozen tundra of Maryland to any other manner, supply chain or local permitting or utility or any other excuse they can come up with. They don't usually talk about their inability to get the financing right, which I suspect is at the heart of all of this, but I can't prove that. But if I could, I surely would. But it's not us. And so the suggestion that it's somehow us not expediting these developments and furthering state policy is not so. It's that we're authorizing the folks who aren't getting their job done per our authorization. Would you agree with that?
Well, again, that's our concern. We find it somewhat galling, the fingers pointed all over the place.
All the
except
time,
at
all the time.
project.
Frozen tundra to utility to staff to local governments. I'm tired of it.
Let me say that I've never denied a request for an extension of the construction and operational deadlines. These projects are pursuant to state policy, and they need to get built. The state will never reach its goal of 14.5% if these projects are slow walk, delayed, whether it be because of the developers, or because of the county permitting agencies, or any of the parties is in between. And I will grant the request today, but I'll be looking at these cases with more scrutiny going forward. There's a request of the chair, Commissioner Richard.
I'm not sure how you'd like to handle this, because I think there are two questions, and then there are two recommendations on the second part, and that is on the fine. I think one is to go ahead and I think there are a couple, or maybe the majority of commissioners who want to act on that immediately today. But I would like to also see if we can take a vote on the proposal in the alternative to have a separate proceeding on the fine. So
The chair will grant that request. The request is to set a separate hearing to determine whether a civil penalty is appropriate and what that amount of the penalty should be. The vote begins with Commissioner Boomer.
Am I voting on the penalty question or the extension?
The motion from Commissioner Richard that the chair granted is whether or not to conduct a separate hearing on the penalty amount.
Okay, I vote aye on that.
Commissioner Linton.
Aye.
Commissioner O'Donnell.
Aye.
I want to make clear to my colleagues, I just want to make clear that, and perhaps I was not clear, but I'll restate the motion. The motion is to schedule a separate hearing to determine whether civil penalty is appropriate and what the amount of that penalty should be. Hence, we would not be taking action today on the penalty. Commissioner Bubar, your vote is aye.
Yes, and I appreciate staff's clarification that we're in somewhat new territory on this, and so that's partly what's driving my decision to go with aye.
Thank you. Commissioner?
And I vote aye again, Mr. Chairman, and I expect there will be full discovery, including the ability to probe very deeply into what this development is.
Thank you.
Including the financing.
Commissioner Linton? You were on record as aye?
Yes, I'm on the record as aye. I would have made a friendly amendment, but your voting already started. So it would have been to say hearing or procedure. So it didn't necessarily have to be
The procedure,
sitting here. But
right, and the procedure could be paper procedures,
Yeah.
not necessarily an in-person hearing. Yeah.
I think that's on the record.
Right, I didn't get in time. So
Changing it midstream.
We could conduct a separate motion if you'd like,
It
Commissioner.
says a hearing. That's what we
Well,
voted a hearing. Now
I
we're
guess
changing it midstream.
in my conversation, I did ask.
friendly amendment.
Okay. Well, I did ask whether that could also include a paper hearing, so I think you said yes.
Yes, typically we talk about hearings. Obviously, a lot of times they're live, but they could be paper hearings. They both develop a written.
This is a ridiculous change of the motion in the middle of a vote, and I change my vote to no. There's no paper proceeding going to occur here if I have anything to say about it, because I want the ability to ascertain the veracity of these developers and their counsel.
I
don't know why anybody would avoid that.
I did not specify, I said hearing, I didn't specify paper or in person. So Commissioner Bubar is aye, Commissioner O'Donnell is no, Commissioner Linton is aye.
I'm still aye. I'm aye either way.
Aye either way. Commissioner Richard?
Aye.
I vote no. The motion passes on a 3-2 vote. A future hearing will be scheduled on this topic.
Is it going to be a hearing?
It will be a hearing, whether in person or paper is to be determined.
Well, that's, reading is not hearing in my book, but maybe it's a legal term that has a different meaning.
The next motion, I move that we grant the company's request for a 3-year extension of the construction and operational deadlines outlined within its approved CPCN for good cause and adopt the October 24th recommendations of PPRP with respect to its recommended licensing conditions. The vote begins with Commissioner Bubar.
Aye.
Commissioner Linton.
Mr. Chairman, I vote aye here as well. I'll just vote aye for now.
Commissioner O'Donnell.
I vote no, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to say we have rendered these deadlines meaningless for these developments. We're not serious about developing this stuff. We give a lot of voice to saying we are, but then we extend them all the time for any manner of reasons. And we ought to be serious about holding these people who get these authorizations and take up capacity, hold their feet to the fire, and we don't do it. And I'm tired of it. And I'm tired of developers coming in here extending continuously. We have very few developments on the books.
Commissioner Richard.
Aye.
I vote aye. The motion is approved. Counsel for Kiefer Funk will be in touch with respect to the future hearing.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
At this point, I will be departing the commission. Commissioner Richard will become acting chair. Thank you, Mr. Secretary.
Mr. Chairman, we have one more item on the agenda today. Item number 8 is Block Street Residential Development LLC filed an application for approval of an energy allocation system.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Michael Spiegelman on behalf of staff. This item concerns a request filed on April 5, 2022 by Block Street Residential LLC for approval to install an energy allocation system for 289-unit apartment building located at 1405 Point Street, Baltimore, Maryland. Block Street previously filed a request for approval on December 15, 2020 under mail log number 232943. That application was denied without prejudice by the Commission because the company had not provided sufficient evidence of complying with all applicable Commerce provisions. Those deficiencies has been rectified in the current application. Public Utility Article Section 7-304B2 states that energy allocation system may not be used for direct billing of energy cost to a tenant of an individual dwelling unit unless the Commission approves the system in accordance with this subsection. Commerce 2026-0201 specifies general approval criteria for energy allocation system, namely, first, approval may be granted upon demonstration by the owner that the system results in reasonable determination of the cost of the energy used within the dwelling unit. Second, testing and inspection of the energy allocation system may be required for the Commission to make such a determination. And third, testing of inspection of any furnace, appliance, or other equipment used in conjunction with the energy allocation system also required. Block Street Residential Development LLC has contracted with Studebaker Submetering Inc. for the installation of Daikin Power Proportional Distribution System and energy allocation system that will allow the owner of the apartment building to allocate to a tenant of individual dwelling a portion of the cost of gas and electric energy consumed based on usage. Block Street Residential Development application contained all information required under Commerce 2026, and subsequent data request responses has given staff no causes of concern in regards to the system itself. The apartment building's construction is complete and use of energy allocation system would comply with requirements under relevant Commerce provisions. Therefore, staff recommends that the Commission approve the energy allocation system for the Block Street Residential Development apartment building located in Baltimore, Maryland. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Spiegelman. Do we have a representative from Block Street Residential?
Thank you, Commissioners. Good afternoon. I'm Ann Seville with Studebaker Submetering on behalf of Block Street Residential.
Great, thank you. Do you have any response to the staff recommendation, staff buck sheet?
We support the buck sheet.
You do, great, thank you. Do my colleagues, commissioners have questions?
What in the record is being corrected?
Okay,
What in the record is being corrected?
Oh, they provided all necessary information as required by Comar.
After the fact.
Yeah.
But that's not the record. That's not what happened. That's not the history. All right, I'll just vote no.
Commissioner Linton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, maybe I might be able to make it easier for me at least. Good afternoon. The commission staff has suggested that we backdate your request for approval. I didn't see that request as part of your filing. Do you need it to be backdated, and if so, why?
I don't have, I thought everything had been filed previously, so that I don't. I don't know that we need to have it backdated further, no.
Okay. To the commission staff, is it your understanding that there's a reason why it needs to be backdated beyond today?
Your Honor, I, I've been going through the Amazon emergency backup generator, non-pro-tunk matters, part 1 and part 2. I agree that it does not need to be backdated, and I think I'm just substituting for the attorney who handled this. But it does set forth the option if the commission determines that approval non-pro-tunk under its discretionary authority is not warranted, then staff recommends that the commission approve the EAS application. And I think that's exactly what you can do, just approve it.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we approve the application, not backdate it.
And that was going to be my suggestion. So that is okay. We can just strike non-pro-tunk from.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Fantastic. Okay, that seems to be a trigger word. So our.
Well, hang on. It's more than
I'm
that.
sorry,
It's more than that. It's a misapplication of a legal philosophy, and it's a misapplication that's been used way too many times here. It's not a trigger word.
Got it.
Got it.
Okay,
Good.
I would move that we approve the energy allocation system at the 1405 Point Street Apartments in Baltimore, Maryland. Vote starts with Commissioner Bubar.
Aye.
Commissioner Linton.
Aye.
Commissioner O'Donnell.
Aye.
Commissioner Richard. Aye. All right. We are adjourned.